Well, hello there, watching the press preview, a first look at what is on the front pages. Time then to see what's making the headlines with the broadcaster and political commentator Salma Shah and the senior political correspondent at the New Statesman, Harry Lambert, who are both at the Conservative Party conference in Birmingham. So let us take a look then at the front pages. Well, the Eye, Tory open warfare, that's how the Eye describes the situation at the party conference after days of infighting over tax cut U-turns and fears for benefit payments leave Liz Truss struggling after just 29 days in charge. The Metro pictures the PM looking a little bit like Bob the Builder and asking appropriately, perhaps, can she fix it? The Telegraph looks ahead to her keynote conference speech tomorrow with a warning that things will get worse before they get better, but it will be worth it in the end. The Express also adopts the building theme ahead of the speech in Birmingham. The Times, too, leads with Liz Truss's expected comments tomorrow. The Financial Times, meanwhile, says she's trying to rally sceptical members of her own party behind her. But The Guardian leads with claims of a possible coup already being planned to unseat her from the leadership. The Star says the Chancellor has found something new to blame for the tax U-turn shambles, the Queen's funeral. While the Daily Mail claims an exclusive with an apparent pledge by the police that an officer will be sent to every reported burglary in future. Quick reminder, by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. So let's head straight to our guests then. Broadcaster, political commentator Salma Shah, senior political correspondent at the New Statesman, Harry Lambert. Welcome to both of you. We will come on to Liz Truss's speech in a moment. But first of all, let's reflect on today, or in fact the last few days, with the Eye, Salma, Tory open warfare. Has she lost control and has she lost credibility and authority?
I think it's pretty hard to say that she hasn't lost control, and this is probably one of the most ill-disciplined Conservative Party conferences that I think certainly I've attended in a very, very long time. The Eye front page details, all the various things that are going wrong and, how other MPs are sort of trying to galvanise against her. But there's one that particularly sticks out on that front page, and it's Nadine Dorries making an intervention about the fact that she shouldn't move too much away from the 2019 manifesto, and that if she did, it would require a general election. So I think what's interesting about this is that it's not just the Michael Goves of the world that didn't support her, but actually people that were really strongly supportive of Liz Truss's leadership that are now sort of criticising and warning her against moving away from what she pledged in the leadership campaign.
Yes, Nadine Dorries speaking tonight. I think we'll look back on this in the future. We removed the Prime Minister who won us the biggest majority since 1979. In less than 3 years of winning that majority, Conservative MPs in the future may have a lot to answer for. Certainly, if you look at the polls right now, you might agree with her, in fact. But the Eye as well, Harry, suggesting that Truss's position is not safe, a minister tells the Eye. We've been here before, we might have to do it again. I mean, she's got a lot to do, hasn't she, in that big speech to conference on Wednesday?
She has, but it may already be too late. I think the remarkable thing that we've seen over the last 10 days, really, is that the political dial has shifted. This is a moment a little bit like September 2007, when Gordon Brown failed to call an election and the credibility of the Labour Party was shot, or even September 92 with Black Wednesday, when the Tory party's credibility was shot. You know, walking around conference the last few days, you just feel like the temperature has changed and that the Conservative Party itself is losing its credibility. It's not just about the latest leader, it's about the party as a whole. And you see that in the polling data, down 25 points now in the headline polls. And for the first time, as I say, since 2007, they've lost their record of competence on the economy.
Yes, and certainly some people suggesting it's now existential for the Tories with polling like that. It's almost wipeout time. The Eye again suggesting that she's been told she has 10 days to save her premiership. So we move on, Salma, to the Daily Telegraph. Disruption is the price of success, is what she will say tomorrow. Liz Truss will warn that there will be further disruption as she fights to deliver economic growth. But insisting that she would reshape the country and there can be no more drift and delay in the effort to boost economic growth, defending her new approach, which will, she says, unleash the full potential of our great country. The problem is whether she has time to wait for that, Salma.
Yes, and I think it's interesting because, of course, The Telegraph is sort of a traditionally right-wing paper and will obviously try and give her the benefit of the doubt before this speech. But this speech, strangely, even though she's only been Prime Minister for a month, and it should have been an amazing celebratory event for her, this conference, is ending up being a make-or-break moment for her. And as you rightly pointed out in sort of the extracts that you've taken from her speech, or the words that are expected, she's actually really doubling down on her vision for growth. And what's interesting about that is that it could have been an opportunity for her to try and broaden the tent, try and bring some of these people in, try and show a bit of contrition. But she's already had a huge U-turn this week on the 45p rate of tax. And she seems to want to try and regain the control by, again, like, as I say, doubling down. And I'm not entirely sure that that is going to be successful tomorrow.
Yeah, the Daily Express, PM, my changes will disrupt but build a better future. More words from Liz Truss. In fact, they've released, more than normal, I would suggest, possibly. For too long, our economy has not grown as strongly as it should have done. For too long, the political debate has been dominated by how we distribute a limited economic pie. Instead, we need to grow the pie so that everyone gets a bigger slice. That is why I am determined to take a new approach and break us out of this high-tax, low-growth cycle. That is what our plan is about, getting our economy growing and rebuilding Britain through reform. The low-growth suggestion, I mean, some might say in the country, not in her party, that was partly austerity brought in by the Conservatives in 2010 and also possibly by Brexit. So, could you argue the last 12 years has effectively slowed growth because of what the Conservative Party have done, Harry?
I think absolutely. I think you captured two of the key issues, and there's a third one, which is the NHS backlog. Kwasi Kwarteng's team, his spokesman, after his catastrophic budget statement, conceded to the lobby at the time that if they were just able to get back into work, many of the people who had been forced off sick since COVID, growth would really increase by maybe as much as a percentage point. And a big reason why people haven't come back from being long-term sick after COVID is because of the NHS backlog and the government's inability to give the NHS the money it needs. And that's only going to be more likely now that they're cutting taxes for the top rates of income. Of course, they've reduced the 45p rate, but on the whole, we're still seeing unfunded tax cuts. And I think there's always been an irony to the Brexit project, which is the Office for Budget Responsibility was saying it's a 4% cut in long-term economic growth. And that was something that was seen as a price they were willing to pay. And yet now we hear nothing but of the need for economic growth. So that's a tension at the heart of the conference all week now.
Yeah, the Times also going with it, brace for more change, says trust the disruptor. The Financial Times as well, Truss strives to rally MPs after Tories renew their infighting over benefits threat. It's just 30 minutes, we're told, this speech will be, to try to bring unity to her party. Does she need to have a cabinet reshuffle in order to bring those who might criticise her into the fold? Does she need to stop being the disruptor? What might help her at this stage, Salma?
So just to say, I think for a lot of people, limiting the speech to 30 minutes is probably quite a welcome thing, especially a nice departure, I would say, from the 50 to 60 minutes that you used to have to listen to a leader go on. But there is a lot that she could do. Whether it's enough to sort of stabilise and whether she's willing to do it, I think is an important question. So you mentioned reshuffle. Yes, she could bring some of her critics back into the fold, but then that will create a lot of tension and a lot of conflict within the cabinet. And I'm not sure she would actually be able to get through what she really, truly believes in. I don't know what you think about this, Harry, but she really does believe the stuff that she's talking about. So there isn't really that sense of kind of balance or consensus that I think she's looking for. I think she, in some senses, quite likes that conflict, and she feels like she's trying to usher in this new economic age and this new period of growth.
But isn't the whole problem that there's never been a basis for her belief system, or at least she hasn't outlined one to the country? You saw there was polling data this week showing that the word that people now associate with Truss above all others is incompetence. And we might be more inclined to trust her if we had good reason to believe that her plans were going to lead to growth. What are the reasons to believe in this?
Well, I'm sure, and this is what I'm hoping that she's going to set out tomorrow. But I think one of the things that has been really interesting in this conference is that a lot of it has been based on rhetoric and not hugely substantive. And I'm sure we'll be going through the papers, a few other papers to see what the actual meat of the policy is. And I think the meat of the policy has been quite light this conference.
Yes, I mean, you can kind of see why, can't you? The U-turn on the highest rate of tax, Harry, politically expedient, but certainly for leadership reasons weakening, is it not? And it's led Suella Braverman today, it's in the Telegraph and in fact the Guardian, talking about there'd been a coup. Now, if you want to try and bring unity, criticising your colleagues for staging a coup is perhaps not the best way of doing it.
Well, we seem to have lost cabinet collective responsibility. It's an extraordinary situation. You have Simon Clarke, as the papers touch on, essentially quote tweeting Suella Braverman and agreeing with her view. You've also got, the likes of Penny Mordaunt openly coming out and saying we need to opining on benefit policy. So I think we're now reached a point where
in fact, Lord Frost
it's a free
as well
for all.
today as well. Lord Frost too coming out suggesting that benefits need to stick to an inflation rise, not a wages rise. But anyway, do continue. Sorry.
It feels like the final days of the May era. When you just had everyone sounding off, and we're in week 4 of the Truss premiership. So it's really a remarkable situation in that sense.
And well, give us a sense of the mood there. I heard one person say it was 50 times worse than when Ian Duncan Smith was in charge of the party and he was out 2 months later. What is your analysis and assessment of what it's been like?
So I don't remember the Ian Duncan Smith days, so I can only take it as read that that's how it felt. But surprisingly, and I think lots of people will disagree, and I'm sure Harry will, that the mood here has been strangely quite buoyant. And I don't know if that is because there's a lot of people who are sort of true Truss believers who are in attendance at this conference. Or whether it's because people have decided that, this is one of the last hurrahs that we're going to have. But certainly there's been, a lot of energy and a lot of activity, and that might also be driven in part by the fact that it has been so chaotic. But I think this is the point, is that the Prime Minister, when they come to conference, they're not just talking to whoever's in the hall, they're actually talking to the country, because the whole nation reports on it, watches it, is intrigued to see what's going to happen and what announcements are coming. So I think that's the kind of conflict that we're seeing between what the membership and the activists are sort of looking at and thinking and feeling, and what people at home who aren't attached to the Conservative Party and aren't necessarily interested in the sort of internal machinations of what happened and what they're actually expecting and looking for.
Yes, and in fact it did. I did reflect. Oh, go on. Sorry, Harry. I was just going to say I did reflect this week that the fact that during her hustings, Liz Truss did direct what she said to the members and not to the country. Whether she's kind of reaping the rewards for that now, just very quickly.
Well, exactly. She was elected by the members, by 80,000 of them. They were never representative of the public, and therefore a conference like this is always going to be a bad temperature test for how well she's doing. But it pales in comparison to the mood at Labour conference last week. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I think we've gleaned that, if I'm honest with you, but there we are. Lots more still to come, including we'll look at this story on the front page of the Daily Mail, the headline official, police to attend every burglary. That and more after this. Well, welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me once again, the broadcaster and political commentator Salma Shah, and the senior political correspondent at the New Statesman, Harry Lambert. Welcome to both of you. Ukraine, Harry, making the front pages once again. First of all, what seem to be rapid advances by Ukrainian forces in both the east and, in fact, now the south of the country, confirmed by the Ukrainian president, but also a spat with Elon Musk. So if you'd like to just wrap those together, that would be brilliant. Small subject for you.
Elon Musk, one of the world. Sure. So Elon Musk has taken to giving not even advice so much as a command as to how the war in Ukraine and Russia should seemingly end, suggesting that Crimea should be left for the Russians. He said it's been Russian since 1783, and some people pointed out that much of the United States wasn't part of the United States in 1783. But he suggests that the Ukrainians are sort of holding up peace in some manner. Zelensky then came back and put out a poll saying, who do you prefer, the Musk that supports Ukraine or the one that supports Russia? It's all a bit of a sideshow from the real story here, which is that Ukraine has, as we know, over the last couple of months, finally, and really the last few weeks and even days, finally pushed both in the east and in the south, in Kherson, where the Russians are encircled. There are about 20,000 troops there. The Ukrainians using the HIMARS weapons supplied by the Americans have damaged the two bridges that allow the Russians to resupply those troops. And therefore, it's really just a matter of time. And we've been waiting for the breakthrough, and that increasingly seems to be happening there and having already happened in the east. And so now the excitement in military circles is where does the Ukraine deploy its strategic reserve? In other words, its third mass of troops. And people are hoping that they might try and cut the two fronts in half and advance on Melitopol. So, you know, Musk is a sideshow here. On the ground, things are looking good for the Ukrainians.
Yes, and we saw pictures there of Lyman, which has been liberated for the Ukrainians in the east, and that makes you realise why The Guardian's headline reads, "What was it all for? Shattered Lyman picks up the pieces," because that was indeed shattered, was it not? Now we go to the Daily Mail. I thought you wanted to talk about burglary, but maybe you want to talk about Agatha Christie. So, Salma, maybe you want to talk about both of them for me, a little bit like Harry had to.
Well, the Mail is covering crime and justice all together on its front page. And first and foremost, the splash is about a commitment of police chiefs up and down the country for police officers to attend every incident of burglary in their patches. Now, as a former Home Office Special Advisor, I have to say that I am slightly sceptical at that undertaking and whether it can be fulfilled. There are still, lots of things to do in order to meet the manifesto commitment to recruit 20,000 more police officers that I think would be helpful to that. But I also think that, as soon as it doesn't happen, it's going to become a big story. So reserving judgment for how well that's going to pan out. And then moving on to the justice part of the Mail splash, in the Agatha Christie trial, obviously, Colleen Rooney came out on top. And it's now being reported that damages have been awarded to her from Rebecca Vardy to the tune of £1.5 million. So I think another interesting chapter in this soap opera saga.
Which the newspapers have followed with great interest, one might say. Salma Shah and Harry Lambert, lovely to see you both. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.